Welcome back to Yehoshua's Daf Yomi Shiur, where the Daf continues until the complete revelation of Mashiach ben David. Today we will be studying Tractate Chullin, page 55a, top of the page, with the words Shiuran bichdei sikas katan. שיעור המרתי סיגת קטן מאוד לא כמעלה לא כלמטה לא כלמעלה. Their measure in order to be susceptible to ritual impurity is that they can hold enough oil with which to anoint a small child. If they cannot hold this amount, they are considered useless and are not susceptible to impurity. And this measure applies only to vessels that held up to a log when they were whole. If they had originally held more, they must hold more when broken in order to be susceptible to impurity. What? Is it not teaching that if it originally held exactly one log, it is treated as though it had held below that amount? If so, the term up to means up to and including. The Gemara responds, no. If it held exactly one log, it is treated as though it held above that amount, and if broken, it must be capable of holding a greater measure in order to be susceptible to impurity. The Gemara suggests, coming here, proof from the continuation of the same Mishnah. If the vessel originally held from a log up to a se'ah, its broken off base or sides must hold a quarter log in order to be susceptible to impurity. What? Is it not teaching that if it originally held exactly a se'ah, it is treated as though it had held below that amount? The Gemara responds, no. If it held exactly a se'ah, it is treated as though it had held above that amount, and its base or size must hold a greater measure in order to be susceptible to impurity. Toshima misov yatzosayim b'chatzi log ma'ilav sosayim kilemato lo sosayim kilemato. The Gemara suggests, come in here, proof from the continuation of the same Mishnah. If the vessel had originally held from a se'ah up to 2 se'ah, its broken off base or sides must hold half a log to be susceptible to impurity. What? Is it not teaching that if it had originally held exactly 2 se'ah, it is treated as if though it had held below that amount? The Gemara responds, no. If it had held exactly 2 se'ah, it is treated as though it had held above that amount. V'yotanyo lo kilemato so kilemato sasayim kilemato. The Gemara asks, how can one explain the Mishnah in this manner? But isn't it taught explicitly in a Braita? If the vessel had originally held exactly a log, is it treated as though it had held that amount below that amount? If it had held exactly a se'ah, it is treated as though it had held below that amount. If it had held exactly 2 se'ah, it is treated as though it had held below that amount. Evidently, the term up to means up to and including the given measure, in contradiction to Rav Nachman's opinion that it means up to and not including the measure. Hasam lechumra, Amar Rav Yevahu, Amar Rav Yochanan, Kol shiurei chachamim lahachmir. Chutz b'kegris shet kesomim lehokel. The Gemara responds, the term up to is always interpreted in the more stringent manner. Accordingly, there, with regard to the impurity of vessels, the term up to is interpreted as up to and including in order to rule stringently, since the vessel is then more easily susceptible to impurity, as Rabbi Bahu says. That Rabbi Yochanan says, All measures of the sages must be interpreted stringently, except for the measure of a groat as a standard for stains of blood found on a woman's clothing, which is interpreted leniently, even if the stain is exactly the size of a groat. The woman remains pure. Here it is more stringent to interpret the phrase up to as up to and including, because an animal is then more susceptible to being rendered a treifa. Dekanami the Gemara notes the language is also precise, meaning it is evident that the phrase up to is always interpreted stringently. As the Mishnah in Kalim 19:2 states that if a rope extending from a rope bed is of any length up to 5 handbreadths, it is not susceptible to ritual impurity. But if it is of any length from 5 up to 10 handbreadths, it is susceptible. And a Braita teaches with regard to that Mishnah, if the rope was exactly 5 handbreadths long, it is treated as though its length were above that. If the rope was exactly 10 handbreadths long, it is treated as though its length were below that. In both cases, the measure is interpreted stringently. The Mishnah teaches, if the spleen was removed, the animal remains kosher. Rabbi Avira says in the name of Rav, the sages taught that it is kosher only when the spleen was removed, but if it was perforated, it is a treifa. Meisiv Rav Yossi bar Avin, Yitem Rav Yossi bar Zvido, Choitich Meubar, Shibimeo, Muto Bachila, Minat Chol, Minat Kloyois, also Bachilo. Ha Bahema Gufas Shario, Rav Yossi bar Avin, and some say Rav Yossi bar Zvida, raised an objection from the Mishnah in the next chapter, 68a. If prior to slaughtering an animal, one severs pieces from a fetus that is in the womb and leaves those pieces in the womb, their consumption is permitted by virtue of the slaughter of the mother animals. See 69a. By contrast, if one severs pieces of the spleen or of the kidneys of an animal and then slaughters it, then even if those pieces are left inside the animal, their consumption is prohibited, because an organ severed from a living being is not permitted by the subsequent slaughter of the animal. One can infer from the Mishnah that the animal itself is permitted even when the spleen was severed. Evidently, such an animal is not a treifa. Hu hadin dafilu behema nami asiro aidi tona reisha muta bachilo tona nami seifa asur bachilo iboyis emo nikav lecho v'nechtach lechud. The Gemara responds, the same is true of the animal, and even the animal is prohibited. But since the Mishnah taught in the first clause with regard to the parts of the fetus, their consumption is permitted, it taught in the last clause with regard to the parts of the spleen, their consumption is prohibited. To contrast between them, or, if you wish, say instead that a perforated spleen is a discrete case in which the animal is a treifa, and a cut spleen is a discrete case in which the animal is not. Nitluk haklayos amarachish bar papa mishmedrav lakisa b'chulia achas treipo amri marobo vehu dematai likuso limkom cholitz. The Mishnah states that if the kidneys were removed, the animal remains kosher. Rachish bar Papa said in the name of Rav, if an animal was diseased in even one kidney, the animal is a treifa. In the West, meaning in Israel, they say, and this applies only in a case where the disease reached the location of the crevice. In 55b now. Amar Rav Nechunya sheletinu lechulei trofi dima'avo ameli hilchasa kerochish papafa v'leser hilchasa keraviro. And where is the location of the crevice? This is a reference to the white matter under the loins. Rav Nechunya said I asked all the authorities on Treifot of the West, and they said to me, the halacha is in accordance with the opinion of Rachish Bar Papa in the name of Rav that a diseased kidney renders an animal treifa, but the halacha is not in accordance with the opinion of Avira that a perforated spleen renders the animal a treifa. And we'll stop here for side A. We're actually on side B, but for the recording of side A.